Debra Morgan's love for Dexter wasn't just a secret, it was an open truth, hiding in plain sight. While some might have noticed, few dared to confront it. In this video, we'll reveal who knew about Debra's forbidden feelings for Dexter, how they figured it out, and what this realization means for her complicated relationship with him. Stay with us, because the answers will completely change the way you see Debra. The first person who truly heard Debra's confession about her feelings for Dexter was her therapist, Dr. Michelle Ross. Debra Morgan's confession to Dr. Ross was a turning point. After witnessing Dexter kill Travis Marshall, Debra's world collapsed. She wasn't just dealing with trauma from the murder, she had to face feelings for Dexter that she had buried for years. Therapy wasn't Debra's choice. She thrived on action, not reflection. But under Dr. Ross's questioning, she admitted, "I think I love him, not as a brother." This moment wasn't just about her feelings. It exposed the complexity of Debra's identity. A tough detective with a strict moral code, now facing an emotion that challenged everything she believed. Dr. Ross's question, "Where do you think this comes from?" pushed Debra, and us, to look deeper. Was her love for Dexter romantic, or was it rooted in her childhood? Growing up, she watched Harry focus on Dexter while she fought to prove herself. Dexter was the one constant in her life, someone who never left her side. Was her love about him, or about holding on to the stability he represented? Debra's failed relationships, Quinn, Lundy, and others, seemed to point back to Dexter. Was she subconsciously comparing them to her brother's impossible standard, sabotaging herself in the process? Dr. Ross may have noticed this, but did therapy truly help Debra? Or did it push her deeper into confusion? By validating her feelings, did Dr. Ross inadvertently amplify her identity crisis? This wasn't just a confession, it was a breaking point. Debra's feelings weren't just about Dexter. They reflected her trauma, need for connection, and her struggle to reconcile who she was with who she wanted to be. Now, let's move on to Dexter himself. Dexter built his life on observing people, yet he didn't see Debra's love, or did he? That's the question. Looking back, the signs were clear. Debra's loyalty to Dexter wasn't just sibling love, it was devotion. She prioritized him, risked her career, and even jeopardized her safety to protect him. Dexter, the master observer, never seemed to notice, or was he choosing to look away? Dexter thrived on control, over his urges, his life, and his relationships. But Debra's love was beyond his control. It didn't fit into his world of rules and boundaries. Control isn't just about order, it's about avoiding uncomfortable truths. When Debra confessed, Dexter's response was simple: "You're my sister." But was that his true answer, or was it a reflex, shutting down a conversation he couldn't face? Acknowledging her love would have unraveled everything Dexter worked to build. It would have meant admitting he wasn't just a monster, but a human being capable of love and pain. And maybe that was the one thing he couldn't face. What if Dexter's rejection wasn't about denying her, but protecting her? His relationships with women, Rita, Lila, Hannah, were defined by darkness. He knew the cost of letting someone into his world. Could rejecting Debra have been his ultimate act of love? Or maybe it wasn't about her at all. Maybe accepting her love would have forced him to confront the man he was trying to suppress. The man capable of love, not just a killer. Here's where it gets complicated. By rejecting Debra, was Dexter mirroring Harry's favoritism? Growing up, Dexter was Harry's focus. Debra was left to find her own way. Could Dexter's cold response have reinforced the dynamic that made Debra feel second best? The real question, was Dexter's rejection about protecting Debra or protecting himself? If the one person who knew him best could love him, what did that say about him? Could he truly be the emotionless monster he believed himself to be? Next up is Dr. Evelyn Vogel. She was known for understanding the darkest minds. But how could she miss Debra's forbidden love for Dexter? Or did she see it and choose to ignore it? Vogel, the mother of psychopaths, had an incredible ability to read people. She could see through lies and uncover hidden motives. But when Debra and Dexter spent time with her, Vogel's focus was entirely on Dexter. She remarked, "You've always been closer than most siblings, but never addressed the deeper implications." Was that an oversight or strategy? Here's a theory. Vogel saw Debra's feelings but didn't act because they didn't fit her narrative. To Vogel, Dexter was the central figure, a living example of her success. Debra's emotions were just another piece in the Dexter puzzle. Vogel may have dismissed her attachment as unimportant or even useful. But what if Vogel's silence was deliberate? She was a master manipulator. By letting Debra's feelings simmer, was she testing how far Debra would go to protect Dexter? Every time Vogel praised Dexter's bond with Debra, she reinforced her devotion, unknowingly pushing her deeper into emotional turmoil. Vogel believed Dexter's capacity for love made him unique among psychopaths. She saw his bond with Debra as proof he wasn't completely broken. But what if she misunderstood? What if Debra's closeness wasn't a sign of Dexter's humanity, but a reflection of Debra's romantic feelings? Could Vogel's misreading have fueled the tragedy? Vogel wasn't just an observer, she was a catalyst. Her focus on Dexter blinded her to the toll on Debra. By prioritizing Dexter's development, Vogel may have left Debra to struggle with emotions she couldn't fully understand. So, did Vogel's silence protect Dexter or destroy Debra? And if she saw the truth, was ignoring it brilliance or her greatest failure? Now, let's turn to Frank Lundy. He saw everything: patterns, motives, truths others missed. But did he also see the one truth Debra tried hardest to hide? Her forbidden love for Dexter? If so, why didn't he act? Lundy wasn't just any investigator. He was the investigator. His ability to connect the dots made him stand out. When it came to Debra, he saw her at her most vulnerable. She trusted him in ways she didn't trust others. But did that trust reveal her hidden feelings? Consider the signs. Debra's loyalty to Dexter went beyond sibling devotion. She defended him, justified his actions, and put him before her own well-being. Someone like Lundy would have noticed. Her tone, her body language, even the weight she carried when Dexter was in trouble, all would have stood out to him. Then there's her tendency to downplay Dexter's flaws. Lundy might have seen this as more than bias. It could point to deeper feelings. But here's the question: did he confront it? Lundy wasn't impulsive. He wouldn't act without evidence. Instead, he might have probed subtly, testing her reactions with carefully chosen questions. For instance, did he ever ask why she couldn't separate herself from Dexter, even when it hurt her? Did her response confirm his suspicions, or at least make him wonder? Now here's the real dilemma. Lundy was a man of principles. If he had discovered Debra's feelings, would confronting her help or hurt? What would it have meant for their relationship? Here's a theory. Lundy knew more than he let on. If he sensed part of Debra's heart was still with Dexter, he may have subconsciously pulled away, not out of judgment, but understanding their connection could never fully compete with the bond she shared with her brother. And then the what if Lundy's death cut their relationship short? If he had lived, would he have confronted Debra or continued loving her despite the shadow of Dexter? If Lundy did suspect, it adds a tragic layer to his story. He cared deeply for the people in his life. Carrying her secret, even without confirmation, would have been another burden he silently bore. Then there's Tom Matthews. Matthews always seemed to know more than anyone at Miami Metro. But did he know Debra's secret, her love for Dexter? And if so, why didn't he act? Matthews wasn't just a high-ranking officer. He was Harry Morgan's closest confidant, a master of reading people. For years, he had a front-row seat to the Morgan family dynamics. He saw Harry focus on Dexter while Debra struggled to prove herself. Matthews, trained to spot patterns, couldn't have missed Debra's unwavering devotion to her brother. Debra didn't just protect Dexter, she prioritized him above all else, even at the cost of her career and relationships. Matthews would have noticed her softer tone when she spoke about Dexter, the emotional weight she carried when he was in trouble. To someone like Matthews, this wasn't just sibling loyalty, it was something deeper. But here's where it gets interesting. Matthews wasn't driven by empathy. He was a pragmatist who thrived on control. If he suspected Debra's feelings, he might have seen them as a tool, not a problem. He wouldn't have exposed this knowledge unless it gave him an advantage. Imagine Matthews dropping subtle hints to Debra, just enough to remind her that he was always watching. Matthews' silence raises another question. If he knew, why didn't he confront it? Did he see Debra's feelings as manageable? Or did he stay silent to protect the family dynamic? Matthews might have chosen silence to avoid destabilizing the balance that served his own interests. There's also the possibility that Matthews used this knowledge to protect himself. As Harry's confidant, Matthews was deeply tied to Dexter's secret. Exposing Debra's feelings could have drawn unwanted attention to Dexter's darkness. Matthews would have had every reason to stay quiet, putting his own position first. But here's the darker side. Was Matthews complicit in Debra's unraveling? Her unaddressed feelings for Dexter led her to moral compromises and emotional turmoil. If Matthews had confronted her or Harry, could he have changed her path? Or was his silence a calculated move to protect his connection to Harry's legacy? Now let's turn to Harry Morgan. Harry built his life around uncovering hidden truths. But did he see the secret closest to home? Debra's feelings for Dexter? And if he did, why didn't he act? Harry wasn't just Dexter and Debra's father. He was their protector, their guide, the architect of Dexter's code. As a detective, Harry was sharp. But did his focus on Dexter blind him to Debra's emotions? Harry spent years shaping Dexter to blend into society, leaving Debra to find her place as the second child. This created a bond between her and Dexter, one that blurred the lines between sibling loyalty and something more. Harry must have noticed the dynamic. Debra idolized Dexter as a child, and as they grew, her admiration turned into unwavering devotion. Harry, perceptive as he was, would have seen these patterns. But why didn't he act on it? Perhaps because his focus was always on controlling Dexter's darkness. Debra's feelings might have seemed manageable, or even useful. After all, her loyalty provided another layer of protection for Dexter's secret. Why risk destabilizing that? There's another possibility: guilt. By focusing on Dexter, Harry pushed Debra into a role she shouldn't have had. She became not just his sister, but his emotional anchor. Addressing her feelings would have meant confronting his own failures as a father, a truth Harry wasn't ready to face. But what if Harry's silence wasn't about guilt? What if he believed Debra's feelings could help Dexter? Her love, no matter how complicated, made her protective of him. Maybe Harry saw it as a necessary compromise to keep Dexter safe. The tragedy of Harry's role is how much he saw, yet how little he acted. By focusing on Dexter, he left Debra to navigate her feelings alone. If he had addressed them, could he have helped her find clarity? Or would it have shattered the balance he worked so hard to maintain? What do you think? Did Harry know about Debra's feelings? Was his silence an act of love, or the greatest failure of a father who thought he could control everything? Finally, we come to the one person who knew her feelings better than anyone else. Debra herself. Her confession to Dr. Ross wasn't the start. It was the end of a long, painful journey. Think about her relationships: Quinn, Lundy, and others. None of them worked out, not because of the men, but because of Dexter. Every relationship became a comparison to him, even if Debra never realized it. Here's a theory. Debra didn't just love Dexter romantically, she loved the idea of him, the one person who could protect her, understand her, and never leave. Dexter was her constant. But when she saw the real Dexter, the one with a dark passenger, it shattered her. But was Debra's love for Dexter her greatest strength or her downfall? Her love wasn't just romantic. It was a survival mechanism, anchoring her in a world full of chaos. Yet, it led her into decisions that ultimately broke her. Who truly understood Debra's love for Dexter? Dr. Michelle Ross heard it directly from her, forcing Debra to confront feelings she couldn't admit. Dexter seemed oblivious, or perhaps he chose not to see it. Vogel likely sensed the tension, but her focus on Dexter blinded her to Debra's pain. Lundy might have seen the signs but chose silence. And Harry, despite shaping their lives, kept quiet, driven by guilt and his focus on Dexter. But here's the real tragedy. Despite all these people, no one truly understood Debra, not even herself. Her love for Dexter was more than just romantic. It was a desperate need for connection, built on trauma and fear of abandonment. It trapped her in a cycle of sacrifice and self-destruction. Debra's story isn't just about forbidden love. It's about the need for connection, the pain of unspoken truths, and the devastating cost of loyalty. So, what do you think? Was Debra's love for Dexter her greatest strength or her downfall? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.